Hello. I've had a few people who are interested in how I'm processing payments with Stripe in TerminalWire. It all stems from this tweet. I'd release so many more products if setting up Stripe wasn't so annoying to do correctly. And I responded with this link to No Checkout, which is a gem that I use for my Stripe integrations. And if we look closer at it, the whole point of this gem is a set of Rails controllers that does the least amount possible to integrate with Stripe. That might sound lazy at first, and it is, but if you try to roll your own sign-up and payment form to keep your Rails database synced with your payment info, you'll quickly find out there's better things in life to worry about. This is a lesson I learned the hard way, where if you try to sync all of your payment providers' data into your database, it's going to be difficult for a few reasons. You have to sync data, which is always kind of a pain. And then if for some reason you get cut off by your payment provider or you need to break up, it's much harder to leave whenever you have all this payment provider specific information in your application. So my approach to this now is to use Stripe Checkout, which are kind of the hosted pages, and to have the smallest integration possible with a payment provider so that it's easy to get out of it if I need to for whatever reason. All right, so let's start first with the payment flow. Whenever you buy a license in TerminalWire, there's a core license, which is free. There's no payment flow required there. The Pro license, which you need for commercial use, you can subscribe to it for $99 a year, or $99 a month, or $999 per year. So if we click on that, we put in the URL for our TerminalWire endpoint that we're going to license, and then you hit agree, you'll see that you get taken to a Stripe checkout page. Now if I go back, we'll see that the license was actually created, but it has a state that the payment is required. The important thing that I'm going to be showing you in this video is that whatever you do, whenever you want to integrate with a payment provider, it's important that you create your data first, and then you use your IDs, in my case, database primary keys, to set the IDs within your payment provider. All right, now that you see how this flow works, let's jump into some code and see what we're actually up against here. All right, so first let's go back to the Pro license, and just to kind of bring you back to what that looks like, we have this. And whenever I click on the Pro license screen, we will see this view. We can see we have a form here. We're showing the agreement. This is the web address, and there's a button. This is all just kind of standard Rails CRUD stuff. Whenever you hit that, it submits the form, which runs create, and then you can see once it's created in the database, we actually set the created URL to a new developer license payment URL, which makes sense. If you create a new license, we want to collect payment for it. So this redirects the user to a different controller, and we'll open that. You can see I have the payments controller right here. And the important thing here is the create checkout session method. This is where we set up everything to send to Stripe. And this is where you are creating the checkout sessions. So we want to pass it a subscription. We have the cancel and success URLs up here, which maps back to my application's URLs. The metadata is important. I always stick whatever kind of relevant pieces of the transaction into Stripe as metadata. This becomes important for renewals, cancellations, and things like that. Whenever you get a callback from Stripe saying, hey, this subscription is canceled, you're going to need to look up the license ID in my case so that you can update the status. For the user ID, it's kind of a handy thing that I put in there so I know who purchased this at the time that they purchased it. That's important just to kind of keep records of accounts where the owners may change, and this may not always be the same through the lifetime of an account. The customer is kind of interesting. Stripe does a weird thing on their back end where you can't create or find a customer just using kind of something on their system. You have to create your own. And the way that you accomplish that is you retrieve or create a customer. So you actually have to say, hey, Stripe, do you have this user? And it'll return an error saying, no, I don't have this user. And if they don't exist, then you have to create it. If they do exist, then great. You have that information, you merge this, and then you send it back with the subscription, and all this gets updated. So this is just me being kind of lazy. I could, have the email update happen separately, but I like just doing this all at once. It's just much easier. And then, of course, I have the line items that are being purchased, the Stripe price ID, and the quantity of the items that are being purchased. So that's pretty much it in terms of creating the Stripe checkout session. Now, if we look in the actual no checkout controller that's underlying this whole thing, you can see we have a new method here, and we're just redirecting to the Stripe checkout URL. And we can see how that's built up here, retrieve or create Stripe checkout session. This just checks, is there a checkout session already in progress? Okay, if there is, retrieve it, otherwise create a new one. The create is the one that we implement in our subcontroller. Or sorry, our subclass controller. That's where we implement it. There's some weird things that Stripe does with their callbacks that Rails doesn't like. I kind of hide that complexity down here. You can see I have to manually concatenate this stuff. The reason being is that Stripe needs this so that it knows where to stick the Stripe checkout ID in a callback. And if you don't do this kind of weird stuff that I'm doing here, Rails will actually URL escape this and it breaks the whole thing. So just know that if you use no checkout, it's taking care of some of these weird idiosyncrasies for callbacks whenever you're working with Stripe checkout. All right, so we can see we have create checkout session, which we're calling from the subcontroller. Let's open that up. Here we go. And that's where we're passing it our information. And then we pass it into super, which is doing that weird concatenation stuff that Stripe needs so that we can have a callback. And then up here, we're defining our callback. So if the user cancels, we just take them back to the license where they can see it, and they'll see that payment invalid state. You could change this to whatever you want. Then, of course, there's a success URL. This could be confetti or something like that. But anyway, I just take the person back to the show method right here so that I can update the status. You could have cancel come back here as well, but in my case, what I do is I just send the person back to the show action. And then you can see I can retrieve the checkout session payment status. And if it's paid by the time it calls back, then I activate the license. So I set the status to active, and then I redirect the user to the license URL. So that's really the sum of how no checkout works. It's a very lightweight touch. I don't think it makes sense anymore to have payment methods in your own page. If I try to implement a checkout page that's tightly integrated and all that stuff in my application, I just find that it doesn't work well, especially when you consider all the different types of payments you need to account for, like Apple Pay, all the different vendors that work with Stripe internationally. It's crazy to think about all the different use cases and design considerations that need to happen for payment these days. So it's like, hey, let's just let Stripe work through that. And they do a pretty good job. And the user experience, as you saw from the last screen, is actually quite reasonable. It just takes you kind of to the page, and it can handle all these weird kind of edge cases. It's responsive. It's a lot of things. So I just kind of get this for free. And it even handles some of these upsells. The upsells aren't perfect. I would like to have an upsell to a perpetual license, but there's some weirdness with how Stripe handles that. Mainly, they make too many assumptions. I think I would like to ask Stripe to just assume less and let me kind of define more upsells. The subscription upsell is actually quite good, but I can't say, hey, maybe you should try this product instead, which would be the perpetual license, available currently for $4,999. All right, so let's go back. We can see the payment required thing there, and we have the license. And that's pretty much how no checkout works. Now let's get into some kind of other fun things that I do for product pages. There's also kind of a temptation, I think, to encode as much about your product as you can into your database. And I actually don't do that. I take a completely different approach. My view about products, especially with software, is that it's really more content is kind of the best way to sell it. So let's go to the home page and let's see, scroll down to the bottom. We go into pricing and we have all our different plans here. So we have the Pro plan. We can buy the license. I need to make that a little darker. So this is just a content page, and I'll show you what that looks like in my implementation. So we have the Pro page, and if we look at these things, you can see the Pro plan, subtitle. We have all the things, right? All the features. And what's interesting is I have a Stripe price in here. So that's kind of funny. I have this content page with Stripe prices in it. And this is the thing that I'm selling. Ultimately, well, I am selling software, but like I'm selling this thing called the Pro plan, and it represents this bucket of software. And I don't necessarily care about which features are turned on and off in like a Boolean flag. Those are just kind of assumptions that I make within my application code. You can see how easy it is to just kind of iterate towards something that eventually will be more structured, but I can just kind of list my features out here, distribution, and it's just very easy for me to kind of play around with the pricing assortment and iterate rapidly towards whatever it is I'll end up with in production. So let's kind of look at how this content and this Stripe ID goes from this front matter all the way back to this license model that we were just looking at. All right, let's start with the page. So inside of Pages, Pricing Pro, we have Stripe prices. So how do we actually access that? I have these things in SitePress, which is what I use to manage this content, called page models. And if we look at a product page model, they just encapsulate all of this data. And you'll see here we have Stripe price. But the interesting thing that we do is we access that front matter and we pass it the Rails environment key. So that lets me say in production, I can get the production price. In development, I don't want the production price. I just want the test console price. So I put that here. So this lets me just encapsulate that environment change between the production and the test environments. And of course, I can get the price, the Stripe price. I can have the name of the product, which is the emoji in the title. I even encode URLs in here. So if I need to access this model from anywhere and I want to have people purchase something, I just say, hey, here's the new path. If you want to get this new license, go here, and I'll redirect them to the right place. And these are just some finders that I have so that you can find it, right? So if I say product page model, key, and then I say Pro, it's going to find the right page, and it's going to pass that page into this model so I can access all this stuff. All right. So now that we're here at key, let's go into an actual license model, because this is how it's connected. I think key is a bad method name. It should just be product, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, I have this attribute in my database called tier, and those are just the keys. So it'd be core, enterprise, or pro. So I can retrieve this page model, and then I have access to this from my license model. And so if I call license.product.price, then I'll get the Stripe price for that, which we should see in, I believe, the base controller or the redirect. All right, so the base controller, this is base for all the licenses. So what we're looking at here is a controller that is finding a license. It could be a pro license, an enterprise license, or whatever. And it's applying the tier to it, and it's saying by default, we need a payment for this. In my other controllers, like for example, if you get core, it's free. So I just activate it right away for you. I don't need a payment. I want the failsafe to be payment, so I put that in my base controller. All right. The other thing you can see here has Stripe price. I am checking to see, is there a Stripe price on this thing? And you can see here, I check license product. So I have an instance of a license on my database that's core. It finds the core product, and then I'm actually talking to these static pages with front matter in them. And what's nice about this approach is I get to keep my pricing and the description of my product all in one place. It's not kind of spread out between configuration files, content, or what have you. So it does keep everything inside of this one page called pro.html.md. And later on, if I need to change the price, I can just go in here and change it. So the nice thing about no checkout is it's pretty agnostic with kind of where you're pulling your pricing from. I figured I'd just show you this because I don't see a lot of this. Maybe that's because it's not well known, or maybe it's just a bad idea. I don't know. But regardless, we do check for the price. We need it here. Rails has this weird problem with Turbo where it doesn't redirect to a checkout page because Stripe includes a, what is it? They include a URL anchor in the URL. And for some reason, Turbo strips that out. So that's just something to know. If you are redirecting to a Stripe checkout link in Rails, it's probably going to break, and you have to set turbo equal to false if you're doing a post of a form and then you need to redirect to a Stripe URL after that. It's kind of annoying. I have reached out to both Stripe and both to the Rails team. I opened an issue on the Rails turbo repo for it. Nobody seems interested in fixing it. I think Stripe should fix it. They really shouldn't be including anchors in their URLs, client-side anchors, but they do. I don't know why, but be aware of that. If you're redirecting to Stripe URLs in Rails after a form redirect, you might run into problems where you have to disable turbo. All right, moving along, we can see here license, product name. So I'm able to pull from my model the product content, and then I can just grab like the name of the license for it, the subtitle, and all those things. So let's try buying a pro license from here. You can see it redirects to there. This is grabbing the title from the page there. Request a pro license, and then I have a subtitle that's also grabbed from here. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do whenever you think of your content as part of your application. I'm a big fan of that. I think the database is used way too much. Configuration files are used way too much. It's nice to just kind of have all your stuff in one spot. And so that's kind of my approach to it. All right. So hopefully that gives you a pretty decent overview of how I do things. It is a bit different. But for me, whenever I'm launching these products, if it's one person, it just kind of makes the whole thing easier to have all of the code that you need in one spot. So hopefully this has been useful for you. Check out, pun intended, no pun intended. Have a look at No Checkout. Try it in your Rails app. There is like quite a bit of configuration that you have to do to the controller, but the nice thing is it is all in one place, and it's hopefully apparent where things need to be configured, where to redirect people, and you should be able to integrate with Rails without a lot of integration. All right, I'll see you next time.